Can I ask you a question? Do you still recognize the person that you see in the mirror? And I don't mean physically, I mean mentally. Think back to who you were a year ago, the way you laughed, the energy you had, the patience that you had with the people that you loved, the things you enjoyed, and the person that you were when things weren't quite so heavy. And then ask yourself one simple question. What's changed? Because burnout doesn't usually happen overnight. It happens so slowly that by the time you realize something isn't right, you've almost forgotten what it felt like to be yourself. And maybe you're more irritable than you used to be, and maybe you're more constantly exhausted. Maybe you've stopped enjoying the things that once made you happy. Or maybe you've convinced yourself that this is just the way it feels to be an adult now. And if any of that sounds familiar, you're not alone in this. And today I'm not here to diagnose you. I'm not here to tell you whether you're burnt out or not. I'm simply here to help you notice something. Because sometimes the hardest part of burnout isn't recovering from it. It's recognizing that you're living it. So as we go through today's video, I don't want you to think about your partner. I don't want you to think about your colleague or your friends. I want you to just concentrate on you. Because this might be the first time in a long time that you've actually sat to think about how you actually are. You've just been living on autopilot for a while. Are you actually okay? Let's start with your thoughts, the ones that no one else hears. Have you noticed that even when you feel like you're relaxing, you're not truly switched off? Your brain is still working. Or perhaps you've become forgetful. You walk into a room and you can't even recall why. Or you lose a trail of thought halfway through your sentence, like I used to. You read the same email over and over again because nothing seems to be sinking in. And simple decisions suddenly become so overwhelming. And at first you just tell yourself that you're distracted, or you're getting older, or maybe you're becoming lazy. But when our minds have been carrying stress for weeks, months, and sometimes even years, it's hardly surprising that they struggle to keep up. So let me ask you something. When was the last time that your mind actually felt quiet? Not distracted, not asleep, just peaceful. Can you remember a time? Now let's think about your emotions, because burnout doesn't affect you the way you think. It changes the way you feel. Maybe you've become more irritable. The smallest inconvenience suddenly becomes this big issue. Someone asks you one more question and you can feel yourself snapping. And not because they're difficult, but because you've got nothing left to give. Or maybe you've become more emotional. You cry over things that never used to bother you. Perhaps you've gone the opposite way and you don't cry anymore at all. You don't laugh as much either. You just feel flat. It's almost as though someone has just turned the volume down on your life. The highs don't feel quite as high. The lows don't even surprise you anymore. And you just keep going because that's what you've always done. And after a while, you stop asking yourself how you feel altogether. You just survive today, and then tomorrow, and then the day after that. Tell me, when was the last time you genuinely laughed? I'm talking belly laugh. Not smile politely and not laugh because someone else did, like really actually laughed because, it was hilarious and your stomach hurt. If you can't remember, just notice that. No judgment, just notice. Now, think about the people who you love, because burnout rarely stays at work. It follows us home. Perhaps your family gets a version of you who is running on empty. You've spent all day caring for other people, listening, helping, problem solving, making decisions, and then you walk through your own front door and there's nothing left in the tank. I've been there so many times. Your children want to play, your partner wants to talk, and your friends ask how you are, and all you want to do is be in silence. Maybe you've started cancelling plans because you're exhausted. You don't even want to leave the house. Sometimes we tell ourselves, I'm just tired. But if you've been saying that for months, maybe it's worth asking, is it actually tiredness or is there something deeper going on? If someone who loved you was sitting beside you right now, would they say that you've changed over the last year? What do you think they would have noticed first? Let's talk about work, because for many people, this is where burnout actually first begins. Maybe you used to enjoy your job. Maybe you even loved it. And now everything feels a lot heavier. And the thought of Monday starts creeping in on the Sunday afternoon, which is an actual phenomenon. The Sunday blues is a real thing. And you find yourself thinking, I just need to get through this week. Then next week arrives, and then you say exactly the same thing again. And perhaps you've started feeling a bit more detached. You're still doing your job, but something feels different. It's like you've gone onto autopilot and you're physically there, but emotionally, you've checked out. And perhaps the hardest part of all is the guilt, because you remember the person that you used to be, the one that genuinely cared, the one who had endless patience, the one who wanted to make a difference. And now you're sitting there wondering, what on earth has happened to me? And if you've ever asked yourself that question, you are really not alone. I used to be that person. Finally, I'd love to talk about outside of work, because this is often the first thing to disappear. The hobbies that you loved, the walks, the gym, the books, the coffee with friends, the things that once made you feel like you. Slowly, without even noticing, you stop doing them because you've stopped enjoying them, because you're simply trying to recover enough energy to get through another week. And life becomes smaller: home, work, sleep, repeat. Until one day you realize you're existing. You're not even living. So before we go any further, I want you to pause for a second. Out of everything we've talked about, what resonated with you the most? Was it your thoughts, your emotions, your relationships, your work, or your life outside of work? Because your answer to that question might be the first clue that something needs to be attended to. And the truth is, burnout really happens because of one day. It doesn't happen because of one difficult shift or one stressful week. It usually develops so gradually that we don't even notice that it's happening. It's a bit like walking into the ocean. You know, you take one step, you put your toes in, then you take another step and the water reaches your ankles and then your knees and then your waist. And because every step feels so small, you don't even realize how deep you've gone until you turn around. Burnout can be like that. Looking back, I didn't wake up one morning burnt out. I became burnt out. One small compromise at a time, one shift, one skipped lunch, one cancelled social event, one more time saying I'll be okay, until eventually I just wasn't. And people often describe burnout as developing in stages. I simply want you to think about where you might recognize yourself in those stages. The first stage is often called the honeymoon stage. You're motivated, you're passionate, you enjoy what you do, and you happily volunteer for extra responsibilities. You genuinely want to help, and then stress begins to creep in. You're still coping, but you notice little things changing. You're taking work home in your head, you're sleeping a little less, you're becoming slightly more irritable, you tell yourself it's just been a busy week. Then comes chronic stress, where stress no longer feels occasional, it becomes your normal. And you wake up tired, you finish work tired, you spend your days off recovering. Then comes burnout itself. This is where emotional exhaustion becomes difficult to ignore. You feel so detached, you feel flat, you feel overwhelmed, and you begin questioning yourself, wondering where that old version of you has gone. And finally, some people reach a stage where living like this starts to feel normal. You stop expecting to feel better. You begin believing that maybe this is just who I am now. If that's where you are, please hear me. I don't believe you've lost yourself. I think you've simply been carrying more than anyone was ever designed to carry for way too long. Looking back, one of the hardest things for me wasn't admitting that I was burnt out. It was accepting that I had changed. It genuinely felt like grief. And not because I'd lost anyone. It was because I'd lost the version of myself that I remembered. The version who laughed easily, who had so much energy, who enjoyed life to the fullest. For me, it almost felt like I was grieving in stages. At first, I had the denial stage. I'm just tired. I need a break. Everyone else feels like this. Then I was frustrated. Like, why can't I cope anymore? Then I was bargaining, like once I get through this shift or once I get through this week, I'll take annual leave. I'll just do Christmas and then I'll get leave. And then I was sad because I started wondering, is this my life now? And what do I do? And then acceptance, not giving up, accepting that something had to change. Because until I admitted that something wasn't right, nothing could change. I wonder, have you been having those conversations with yourself too? And before we finish, I'd like you to do something, just for a moment. Close your eyes, if it feels comfortable. Take a slow breath and ask yourself these questions. When was the last time I genuinely felt like myself? Generally felt like me? And what has changed over the past 6 to 12 months? Is it my thoughts, my emotions, my relationships, my work, or life outside of work? And if someone who loved me asked me that answered those questions, what would they say? How would they tell me that I've changed? What stage are you in today? The labels don't matter. And you're not trying to diagnose yourself, but you should be aware so that you can create choices. We can't change anything until we acknowledge it. And if today's video resonated with you, please don't walk away thinking that you need to fix everything by tomorrow, because you do not, and it'll be extremely hard to do so. You only need to take one small step. Maybe that's talking to someone that you trust. Maybe make an appointment with a GP to explore how you've been feeling and to rule out other possible causes. Maybe it's just admitting to yourself that you're not okay. And whatever the first step looks like for you, please don't ignore what your mind and your body are trying to tell you. They're not trying to work against you, they're trying to get your attention. At the very beginning of this video, I asked you to imagine standing in front of a mirror, looking at the person you are today, and comparing that person to the person you were a year ago. And if after watching this video, you've realized that I've changed, please don't let that thought fill you with fear. Let it give you hope, because recognizing that you've changed doesn't mean you've lost yourself forever. It simply means you've become aware that something needs your attention and awareness. And this is where change begins. And in my next video, we're going to build on this conversation. We'll look at what burnout actually is and why it happens, why healthcare professionals are particularly vulnerable, and most importantly, the practical steps that helped me begin feeling like myself again. Not overnight, not through some magic solution, but just one step at a time. Until then, be kind to yourself. Take care, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.